and acknowledge Susan McCooch's comment about this being a long-term type of public good, because there's so much information that's going to be coming out of this, and it's going to be years and years of integrating it into a breeding program. And then also to add my comments about the facilitating the movement of germplasm and seeds from this basic going on in informatics, that clearly defining the rules and guidelines of sharing seeds will greatly facilitate that and help in this process. And this group could help be a driver to help move go in that direction. Thank you.
Does anybody of the people who are online here, I don't know if you can hear us, but if any of you who are out there on the web want to make a comment or ask a question, please go ahead and do so.
Hey, this is Detlef from Tübingen. Can you guys hear me all right?
Hello, Detlef. Yep.
Hi there. Just a couple of things. So, what we have learned from the Arabidopsis project, that it's imperative that one figures out where to have the data centrally before starting the project. We did this all very much on the fly, and let's say it has been definitely suboptimal. The other thing that I've become very concerned about, how to easily track the germplasm. So you're going to generate huge amount of genotypic data and as well as phenotypic data, but there have to be ways for anybody working with the plant material to very rapidly verify that they are actually working with the lines they think they are working with. So I think this is something that one needs to give a lot of thought also right away. I assume with the rice lines, it would be a little bit more of a challenge because you have many more lines that are quite similar to each other, both phenotypically and genetically.
Yeah, I think
those were my two comments.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I think the last one goes a little bit back to what Ken McNally was already indicating. For those activities that we have been involved with, that has actually been a very significant part. Also being able to have really the same purified single seed descended seed source, and then making that available and tracking that, I think that is a critical issue. Yeah. Now, whether we're always doing this well enough yet in terms of quality control or not, I cannot judge, but to me that is essential too. Yeah. Okay, any other suggestions from the people in the cyber world? Nobody?
I think I'm the only one on. Blake had to run off to another meeting.
Oh, it's true, yes. Yeah, he was
at noon.
For the first hour, yeah. Flavio.
I'm Flavio Rezeguelo from Embrapa. So I think that this whole thing of bioinformatics and sequence information must be regarded as an as an extension of the gene bank. So I don't like very much I don't see much parallel between the hybrid price consortium. I actually see much more parallel between the rice germplasm network. So what we will be doing is just adding more value and information to the gene bank collections. So this must be as open and free and easily accessible as the seeds stored in IRIC itself. There couldn't be a system based on membership, class A, B, C, or some kind of necessary proportionality between what you put in and what you take from. So to be appealing to sponsors and donors, I think we must remain in the same philosophy of openness and public good as is the seed itself. And we are just adding more value and making the seed bank more useful for everybody.
Yeah, so I think just to respond to that, the HLTC model that I showed, I just showed that as an example. Yeah, so it has been designed to meet its own very specific purposes. And in that particular case, it also needed to have a mechanism for access to germplasm under development, which is actually germplasm that is not necessarily under the gene bank system. Now, how comparable that is to what we need to do here is an interesting question, because at the moment most of these, from what I can see, most of the studies that have been conducted in the public sector have focused on using materials that are under the gene bank or multilateral system. Then it becomes easy. What I foresee is a need in the future to also at least conceptually cover the situation that increasingly people will do these kind of studies for materials under development that are not under the multilateral system. That's already anyway the case for private sector, but I believe it will also be increasingly the case for public sector training programs, at least to some degree. So what we have to come up with is some kind of flexible model that allows us to do both. Ideally, of course, the majority of the information, essentially just what you said, adding new value to gene bank collections. But we may also have to deal with other situations, and so whatever model we come up with, I think it has to be able to deal with that. So, but the hybrid class consortium model is, I just presented that as one that we have already, where we had to find a mechanism to get both public and private sector involved. And I believe that for this activity here, we need to have private sector engagement from the beginning. But what kind of engagement and the rules of engagement is what we really have to work out in the coming months.
So my name is Chad Okamuro. I'm the U.S. Department of Agriculture and Agricultural Research Service. Also function on the interagency working group for plant genomes, part of the Office of Science, Technology, and Planning. We coordinate research. My colleague who had to step out, Ed Koyakawa, and I, Diane Jopuku Okamuro here from the National Science Foundation. We coordinate genetic and genomic research across U.S. government with coordination with OSDP. We're talking about leveraging research funds from U.S. taxpayers, and for many, many years we've insisted by our funding agencies, USDA, NSF, DOE, that the data, the germplasm that's developed, which is funded by taxpayer dollars, be 100% accessible to anyone. That includes accessions from our National Plant Germplasm Collection. We provide access to that collection, 500,000 accessions for anyone who asks for it. We support a number of genetic and genomic databases. You mentioned bean. We also have maize GDB, soy-based grain genes, legume information system, and I think this is a good dialogue you're having here, because it's important for the rice community to come together, maize community come together, soybean community globally to address these issues, because it's a huge challenge. In addition to working together as a community, we have to take that message back to our respective governments, because they also have the same concerns and issues that we're discussing here, but on that level. So just to give you an example, back earlier this year we had the G8 Summit, which was held in Maryland, and the big question of open data, open germplasm access was addressed by the leaders, the G8. There's very, very strong support for open data and open germplasm. That discussion was expanded to the G20 in Mexico. Again, strong support from the member countries, the ministers of agriculture, and they're looking for models for how we work together internationally to coordinate, to leverage, to integrate data, not just in rice, but across systems, because we think there's a lot of value in learning and translating information from Arabidopsis, rice, corn, soybean, and so on. So we're looking for models, examples of how to work together, platforms for open data and open germplasm. So I think you have to go back to your respective country leaderships, make contact, because at this level, at the ministerial level as well, those discussions are ongoing. How do we do this together? So I think input from the Rice Informatics Consortium would be helpful.
Yeah, I think it's a very, very good point. I mean, in my day job, even I'm not an expert in this, but the numbers of times I have to deal with germplasm-related issues, be it the movement of germplasm or IP or whatever, is just amazing. And there's a lot of confusion out there also among, I think, the political leaders in some countries. Sometimes claim ownership over certain things where we don't really have the ownership. Down to the level of, we come across this all the time, some country claiming ownership of a gene. Where you know that this gene has probably evolved 6 times in 6 different countries or whatever. So there's a lot of confusion at the political level. I believe that is not really helping us. And so certainly we could benefit from anyone who can assist us in taking this to the necessary higher levels. And I think you're right, you have to go right away to the ministerial levels with these kind of discussions. And maybe a consortium like this can play a certain role in that too, to at least articulate the needs that the community has, and then see if we can find the mechanisms to bring it to the policy makers.
So just one final point. So to continue the dialogue on this issue, there will be a follow-up meeting in Washington, D.C., April 8th through the 12th. The exact details haven't been worked out, but it's again to continue this dialogue at the G8 and potentially the G20 level. So there actually may be information coming back down the chain from the ministerial level down to the government agencies, to the international centers, looking for input and possibly participation. But I can't speak for the G8 or G20, but at least on the U.S. government side, we're starting those discussions internally.
At least if you like to have any input from us on those kind of things, please keep us informed. We'll be happy to contribute this because we're facing this a lot with many, many countries, and I think we can probably contribute some constructive suggestions on that too.
Okay, just build on.
Yeah, David.
So Jack, I just want to build off on your
Did
comments.
everybody know David?
No. So David Bergmanson, I'm with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I'm with our R&D team. It's supported some of the grants that have been spoken of here today. I'm heading up a new initiative around digital design for development, where we're going to be leveraging big data, whether it's coming from very high resolution remote sensing to genomics data, to see how we can accelerate product development and delivery. And so what I heard today was very encouraging. But there are other efforts going on, and I think, to Susan's point, we should be learning across the commodities, taking the best of each and applying them. And to that end, CIMMYT is leading a similar effort called Seeds of Discovery in very close collaboration with the Mexican government. And I think there's some very good elements coming out of that project, and there are other elements comings out of the legumes community that can be leveraged. So what we're looking at what are the core issues that are cutting across all of these commodities? And as we look at managing and mining big data, issues of data standards, ontology, and so forth become critically important across the whole community. And to this end, if there are thoughts around data standards or other key drivers that are going to ultimately impact on the success of this and other initiatives, we'd certainly like to hear about it. Certainly like to contribute to your discussion, Jack, with the G20. This is a topic that Bill Gates is particularly personally interested in, and we can probably use his voice if he's well armed to reach leadership in the G20. Thank you.
Great. I'm Pankaj Jaiswal from Oregon State University, and I'm a co-PI on Grameen and lead the plant ontology projects. We build standards, data standards at some point so that we can serve the community well and integrate the data nicely so that the information portal and the data can be disseminated in essence. But I think what we are discussing over here is two different entities. There are fixed entities like the seeds and the germplasms and the sequence coming out of those genotypes. Those are fixed entities. Once you sequence, it's fixed. You're not going to change that unless you do some genetic crossing with that seed, then it's going to change. But on the other hand, much of the data resources that are being put together now are more or less guided by, even though they say that it's de novo or things like that, but all the analysis that we put together is based on some kind of a reference. And that is the major bottleneck, which I think is there. And in the future, or it's the immediate need right now, is that we are going to have thousands of genomes and transcriptomes coming out, and the information and the analysis of the data has to be done on the fly. You pick and choose your own reference. You pick and choose. You don't go by the standard fixed haplotype maps that you have. You pick your genotypes and have the genotype sequences coming from your lab or your project and try to analyze and create your own hype maps. And those are the kinds of tools that we need. So I think what we need over here is, which was not in the IRIC slide that I saw here, was some basic tools where a scientist or a researcher or a breeder should be able to pick and choose their own data types and run the analysis on the fly, and not waiting for 8 or 5 or 10 days to get the data back. Data should be coming back within seconds or minutes and within a couple of hours' time. And that's where the cyber infrastructure projects that are led by BGI or Chinese government or the iPlant cyber infrastructure group, those are becoming more critical about it. IAIP style infrastructure over here that we're trying to propose for rice, it's not a bottleneck. It's just a tool to get up to that point, but I think the analysis cannot be fixed. Publications come out, the data is fixed and analysis is fixed, and that's not the right way of going around it. And I think so we should start thinking about on-the-fly analysis, pick and choose your models and go with it. And that's more of a critical. As long as you build your data standard annotations are in a standard format, that would be fine. So another thing was saying that I would be able to have the data released. That's a very fluid statement. Data can come out in FASTQ files, but breeders can't do anything with that. 99% of the time, they don't understand how to open those files. Those files don't open up on the desktops, things like that. So that's a big problem. What is the rationale behind at what point the data is released, and how can you use that data for analysis purposes? If that is not accessible to the breeders, that doesn't mean anything to anybody in any essence. So that's where you need to come up with the strategies on at what point you consider that data is released. Should we be sitting on the data before a publication comes out? I understand that the various national governments and programs are funding those projects, so they expect some outcome in terms of publications to show that they have contributed to that research. But large-scale data sets, I think they should be completely open right from the beginning. 1 or 2 publications don't make any sense, but they should be trackable by amount of time that data is accessed and used for breeding programs and for making the science move forward. that should be the metrics of your judgment or peer review rather than the publications coming out in Nature and Science, things like that. I think that's going to be the future in the next 4, 5, 10 years kind of things. A peer review would fail at that point in time. That's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Yeah, these are very good points. I couldn't agree more, I think.
Can I follow on from Pankaj? Just that Lori and I yesterday were discussing models for the white paper on the 3K data. And ENCODE is a very nice example of a threaded publication model, where the publication and the resources become accessible in a fashion and are annotated so that new analyses, if they follow that same model, can be pulled into the cycle, so that it is a dynamic process online of improvement of both the data set and the analyses over time. That becomes a publication. And hopefully it can all be openly accessible online.
Good. Do we have any other comments to make? Yes, please.
Antonio Costa Oliveira, Federal University of Pelotas, Brazil. Thinking on a climate change perspective, we had some very good talk on the changing of wheat and barley genotypes over in Israel over 20 years, responding to climate change. So I wonder if it was not a time for us to set up sets of core set of genotypes that would be phenotyped every year in several places in the globe to accompany how the phenotypes are being responded to these climate changes, and so we can predict trends that will help us to foresee better food security.
I think in principle, what I showed, this phenotyping network, that we have started to build there, we view this as a longer-term undertaking, obviously. Yeah. And what we have at present there is already based on a core set of materials. There's actually several core sets from what I understand, depending on the environment targeted. But the idea is of that nature. So you have a common stock, and you do precise phenotyping in different environments, and of course you could conceivably add to that the component over time. So I think all of these things should be part of the research portfolio. It is essentially a matter of choosing the right materials, getting the protocols established and the methodologies, and also having a much larger investment in this. Funding that we have available under CRISP for this at present is a fraction of what I believe it should actually be if you really want to make a decent progress there. But I'm hoping that it will evolve over time. And I think my biggest concern at the moment is probably that we still need to do a lot more in actually the phenotyping methodologies to have more precise, high throughput methodologies that actually then work. I think there's still a lot to be done on that side, but yeah, it will evolve.
So taking up an example from that, if you buy a horticulture seed packet in the US market, you go to a grocery store and you buy, I want to grow green peas or things like that. You see at the back of it, it's a model presented by environment and how it grows and where it should be growing it. So it's based on the PRISM EM model that was adopted by USDA and DOE now. And I don't know how it works out, but every seed material that is sold in the U.S. market, for example, is all tested in various nurseries all around the country. and that's where they collect all the information and project the model saying this seed is suitable for growing in certain latitude and longitudes and in certain temperatures during what should be your growth season, and when you should sow it, when you should harvest it, and what would be your yield. I think these are very standard protocols that the seed industry has followed, and I think we could take some clues from them and can be introduced for rice purpose. With any seed packet coming out of IRIC, for example, should be able to tell me where I should be able to grow it, what should be the growth conditions, and what would be the yield parameters for that, just in case, if you're looking at that point in time.
The standardized testing and phenotyping is, in my view, probably one of the biggest challenges for any public sector program. In a seed company, the way that is done is usually much more sophisticated by default and much more focused. Whereas in the public sector, we normally don't have the resources available, and that we end up with a fairly fragmented approach. So I think that is a fundamental challenge. I don't have a clear answer that would suggest that we'll immediately get better anytime soon. We have drawn some own conclusions for our work. We have established a new multi-environment testing system now that we are gradually building up. We have this phenotyping network, but it's way not enough to get to that kind of level of detail than in the end product. So it's, I think.
But if there is a design structure, infrastructure, and the tools, then the national programs have their regional centers as well. So
Yeah.
those seeds can be evaluated, but the data can be fed into the same system, where it's analyzed at a centralized place, or restricted or not restricted kind of thing. But at least you would have information.
Yeah, we used to have this, and we still have that in the form of INJA and the international testing nurseries. The problem that you run into is lack of financial support over the longer term and data return and data quality. When you operate these kind of things with multiple organizations as opposed to being under one corporate structure, you get a lot of problems of that nature. So, but it's part of the improvements that need to be made, and I'm hoping that we'll be able, and others also, to do this and have that utilization of the capacities in certain countries that have the. China was mentioned already, but India for us is another one, for example. Good. I would like to maybe stop here because I see lunch seems to be there. I'm hoping that this is it. And let me do two things. One is, first of all, thank you for coming and making these constructive suggestions. The second, so what we will do is we will have to take this all on board and in the next few weeks come up with a concrete document, a proposal that tries to incorporate all this and lay out the rationale and the bigger picture and the operational mechanisms for such a consortium. So when we have a reasonably advanced draft that can be shared, we will share it as widely as possible with many of you, but also others who could not be here today. I would also like to take it to a few other private companies to discuss. So that will be the next step. So we really like to make sure that this is an inclusive effort, that we have also covered all of the bigger picture items that we need to look at for rice, but also across crops. And so that will be the next follow-up action to do. And I think after lunch, Ken, you would like to discuss some more.
After lunch, we would like to continue, it could be brief, but technical discussion regarding the 3K analysis. So those of you who are interested, please, if you can stay, it'd be appreciated. Another question I have is, at this point, do you think it's appropriate that based on your contact information, if we set up a group site under at our GRISP, which it's specific to GRISP, but it's group site. So we could put it in that domain. If we had been more on top of things and organizing for this than we were, we could have even had a Twitter feed for this week to capture input. I wasn't up to that. I don't use Twitter even. So.
No, but I think setting up a group site would be useful then also when we get to working on a draft and other things to collect comments.
So under that, documents and comments, conversation can be shared amongst all of us.
Good. Well, thank you. And then enjoy the lunch and continue the conversation over lunch. And if Detlef is still there, have a nice day in Germany. He may be gone already.